My friends, let us come together for a moment of inner stillness. Let us forget the world, the conditions of the world, and the countless messages the world has impressed upon us about life, about God, and especially about miracles. We must begin where truth is always found in quietness, where the noise of belief yields to the presence that is forever here. You see, for centuries, humanity has misunderstood the nature of what it calls miracles. To the human mind, a miracle is something extraordinary, something rare, something that breaks the natural order or suspends the laws of the universe. And so the world stands in awe and says, how wonderful, how impossible, how supernatural. But none of this is true. None of this is spiritual. A miracle is not the violation of law. A miracle is the revelation of law, the law that has always been, the law that operates regardless of human belief or disbelief. What the world calls a miracle is simply the moment when divine truth pierces through the veil of human thought, and an appearance is corrected by the activity of the one presence that has never changed. I want you to understand this. Nothing unnatural ever occurs in the kingdom of God. There is no disorder for God to fix, no chaos for God to subdue, no disease for God to heal. These conditions exist only in the realm of human perception, and it is only in that realm that they appear to be formidable, powerful, or real. When human consciousness is saturated with fear, with the belief in two powers, good and evil, health and disease, abundance and lack, it naturally seeks something outside itself to set things right. And so it prays for a miracle. It begs for a miracle. It hopes that God will intervene in the affairs of men. But the God we know in spiritual realization does not intervene. God is not a being who sits apart from us waiting for our requests. God is not a force that chooses one to heal and another to ignore. God is not a power that appears at times and disappears at others. No. God is the infinite, invisible, the ever-present reality that needs no invitation to be itself. When we speak of miracles in the infinite way, we do not speak of things happening to us. We speak of things being revealed through us as our consciousness becomes more attuned to truth. A miracle is nothing more than the dissolution of a false sense of reality and the dawning of the realization that God is the only life, the only law, the only presence operating anywhere. You and I do not create miracles. You and I do not cause harmony. All harmony flows forth of its own accord the moment we stop believing in a power apart from God. As we relinquish fear, as we surrender the belief in an external cause, we discover that what we have called miracle is simply the natural functioning of divine law. Think for a moment of the light of the sun. The sun does not suddenly shine because someone prays for it. The sun does not become brighter because someone needs warmth. The sun is constant, steady, unchanging. But when the clouds pass, when the fog lifts, the light that was always present becomes visible. The world may call that a miracle, but the sun calls it nothing at all. So it is with spirit. So it is with God. When the clouds of belief dissolve even for a moment, the light that has forever been shines through. And to the human mind, this seems miraculous. But to spirit, it is merely the natural order of being. And so, as we begin our study together today, let us lay aside every notion that miracles are mysterious or rare or reserved for the few. Let us understand deeply and quietly that harmony is the law of God, and therefore the law of our being. And when harmony appears in our lives, it is not because something extraordinary has taken place, it is because something true has been realized. There is no miracle out there to seek. There is only God's presence here to recognize. And when that presence is known, even dimly, the conditions of life begin to conform not to our desires, but to the eternal order of spirit. And this the world calls miracle, Let us rest now in that understanding and allow this hour to lift us gently beyond the belief in miracles into the awareness of divine law. Let us continue now in the atmosphere of stillness that has been established. For without stillness, the mind attempts to grasp truth intellectually, and truth can never be known by the intellect. Truth is spiritually discerned. Truth is felt. Truth is recognized through an inner grace that flows only when the mind becomes receptive. Today, I want us to look deeply, quietly, and honestly into the nature of God. For unless God is understood rightly, nothing else in spiritual life can unfold correctly. Our understanding of God is the root from which the tree of our life grows. If the root is false, the fruit will be false. If the root is pure, the fruit will reveal harmony. When we speak of God, we do not speak of an enlarged human being, nor a mighty power acting at a distance. We do not speak of a deity seated upon a throne, nor a being who observes the affairs of men and intervenes according to his pleasure. These are human concepts of God, and they have no place in spiritual realization. God is not a person. God is being itself. God is not a force among other forces. God is the one and only presence. God is not a power that battles evil. God is the infinite presence before whom no opposing power can exist. This is why the ancient prophets, the mystics, and the masters, each in their own way, arrived at the same revelation. The Lord, He is one, not many, not divided, not contending, one. If God is one, then what becomes of evil? What becomes of disease? What becomes of lack, fear, sin, or danger? They have no place to stand. For if God fills all space, if God is all presence, then there is no unoccupied territory in which a second power may establish itself. There is no space in which evil can exist as a force. There is no law by which disease may act independently. There is no principle through which lack can operate. All these so-called conditions are the shadows cast by a belief in other powers, beliefs without divine sanction, without spiritual substance. When we contemplate God as omnipresence, we must take that word seriously. Omni, all, presence everywhere, all presence, nothing outside, nothing in addition, nothing opposing. If we truly understood this, even lightly, we would never again fear a condition. For what condition can stand in the presence of the One? What power can challenge infinity? What law can contradict the all-law? This is not a statement of faith. This is not optimism. This is reality, the spiritual fact that remains true whether we believe it or not. God is the entirety of being, the substance, the law, the life, the intelligence, and the love that forms and sustains the universe. And if this is so, then what we call evil cannot be an entity. It cannot be a force. It cannot be a presence. It can only be a belief. As long as we grant evil a degree of power, we remain bound by the belief in two powers. But when we withdraw consent, when we let go of the notion that there is God and something else, God and disease, God and fear, God and lack, then the appearance begins to dissolve. Not because we fight it, but because it has no spiritual foundation upon which to stand. My friends, it is impossible, utterly impossible, for an evil power to exist where God is understood as the only presence. Evil has no life of its own. It lives only in the mind that believes in it. Disease has no law of its own. It is governed only by the belief that accepts it. Lack has no substance of its own. It appears only in the consciousness that imagines supply to be external. When the mind releases the belief in two powers, even if only for a breath, a moment, a flicker, the Christ, the truth of being, rushes in like light, filling a room the instant the shade is lifted, not slowly, not partially, instantly, completely. Nothing can oppose God. Nothing can resist God. Nothing can stand beside God, for God is all. As you abide in that realization, not as a statement to repeat, but as a truth to rest in, you will discover that harmony is not something added to your life. Harmony is the nature of the life that already exists. And what the world calls miracle is but the natural functioning of that life when the barrier of false belief is removed. Let us sit with this truth for a moment. There is only one presence. There is only one power. There is only one life, and that one is God. In this recognition lies the foundation of spiritual healing, the dissolution of fear, and the peace that passeth understanding. Let us continue in this atmosphere of stillness, for without silence, the truth of individual being is misunderstood. It becomes an intellectual concept, an ideal, a doctrine, when in reality it is the living center of our spiritual life. Let us, therefore, enter this subject not with the mind that seeks to acquire knowledge, but with the heart that is willing to behold what already is. One of the greatest spiritual misunderstandings of all time is the belief that man exists as a separate selfhood, that we possess a life apart from God, a mind apart from God, a substance apart from God. When this belief is accepted, even unconsciously, suffering begins, for separation is the root of every discord. But the truth revealed to the mystics throughout the ages, and which forms the very foundation of the infinite way, is that God expresses himself as individual being. There is not God and man. There is God as man. There is not God somewhere and man elsewhere. There is God manifested, individualized, expressed through the consciousness we call you and me. When we speak of the Christ, we do not speak of a man. We speak of the divine sonship, the spiritual identity that is the center of every individual life. Christ is the name we give to the realization of oneness, the awareness that I and the Father are one, not as a poetic sentiment, but as literal truth. Christ is not a person. Christ is not a being who lived 2,000 years ago. Christ is the nature of consciousness, itself the activity of God as the life of every individual. The world has been taught that Jesus was a divine exception, but in spiritual realization, we learn that Jesus was a divine example. He came not to prove what he was, but to reveal what you are and what every individual is in truth. His demonstration of the Christ was a living witness to what becomes possible when the belief in separation is dissolved. You see, the I that speaks when you say I am is not your human identity. It is not your mind, your personality, your history, or your body. The I is the very presence of God, announcing itself as individual being. This is why Jesus could say, "Before Abraham was, I am." This was not the voice of a human life. This was the voice of eternal spirit, expressing itself through form. When you say I, do you know who speaks? Is it the limited, fearful self you have been conditioned to believe in? Or is it the Christ, the divine selfhood that has never been born and will never die? When we believe that the I of us is a mortal creature, we live under the laws of mortality, fear, limitation, conflict, disease. But when we recognize that the I that lives as us is the Spirit of God, then a great transformation takes place. Not outwardly at first, but inwardly. A deep peace arises, a freedom, a sense of belonging, of being held, sustained, and maintained by a presence that is infinite, unchanging, and whole. The Christ is not attained. The Christ is not achieved. The Christ is not earned. The Christ is recognized as the truth that has always been your identity. When we speak of spiritual healing, we do not speak of changing a sick person into a well person. We speak of awakening the individual to his or her true self, which has never known sickness. When we speak of supply, we do not speak of acquiring abundance. We speak of realizing that the Christ, expressing as you, is the very source and substance of supply itself. When we speak of harmony, we do not speak of arranging external circumstances. We speak of recognizing the one life that is living itself as your life, and in that recognition, harmony flows naturally. Everything in your experience, everything comes forth from your concept of yourself. If you believe yourself to be separate, you will experience the effects of separation. If you recognize your identity as the Christ, as the expression of God, then your experience will reflect that recognition in ways we call healing, restoration, peace, fulfillment. There is no personal ego that must be improved. There is no human self that must be perfected. There is only the false sense of self that must be released and the true self that must be acknowledged. The Christ is your identity, not someday, not after spiritual progress, not when conditions improve, but now, this very moment, as we rest in that truth, quietly, gently, without strain, the miracle of spiritual living begins. We discover that we are not trying to become something. We are simply waking up to what we have always been. Let us pause in silence for a moment and let that truth settle into consciousness. The Christ is your true self. The I within you is God, and all that the Father has is already expressing itself through you. Let us continue now. In the same stillness we have cultivated, for the subject before us cannot be grasped while the mind is agitated, fearful, or argumentative. Truth is never apprehended through resistance. It dawns quietly as light dawns, requiring only a receptive consciousness. In our study of spiritual healing, perhaps nothing has been more misunderstood than the nature of what the world calls error, disease, sin, lack, discord, fear, conflict. The human mind examines these conditions and says, these are real, these are powerful, these have substance and cause, and from that position, it seeks a God to remove them. But my friends, spiritual living begins only when we drop the assumption that error possesses power, presence, or law. Only then can we discover that the so-called powers of this world have no foundation in spirit, no existence in God, and therefore no true authority over our lives. The first great revelation of spiritual healing is this: error is not a thing. Error is belief. It is not a force acting upon us. It is not an entity living within us. It is not a law operating against us. It is the mind's acceptance of a false appearance as though it were reality. Let us listen deeply now, for this must be understood not only with the intellect but with the heart. Disease is not a spiritual creation. It is not made of the substance of God. It is not upheld by divine law. It has no roots in the infinite. It exists only as a mental picture formed through fear, suggestion, heredity, education, and the testimony of the senses. If disease had spiritual substance, no prayer could remove it. If lack had spiritual legitimacy, no truth could dissolve it. If fear had actual power, no realization of God could pierce it. But these conditions dissolve the moment consciousness is illumined because they were never real in God's kingdom to begin with. And so we are not called to fight error, to struggle with it, to oppose it, or to wrestle it into submission. When you fight an appearance, you give it substance. When you resist it, you acknowledge its power. When you fear it, you grant it life. But when you see through it quietly, without strain, you discover that it never possessed reality of its own. Error is a shadow. Error is a mirage. Error is the projection of a mind that believes itself separate from God. But the moment truth is realized, even faintly, the shadow disappears. Not because you have defeated it, but because you have recognized that it never had a life apart from your belief. Consider this. When the sun shines, darkness flees. But did darkness go to battle with the sun? Did the sun fight to overcome darkness? No. The light revealed that the darkness never had substance. It was only the absence of light. So it is with error. Error is the absence of realized truth. Not the absence of truth, but the absence of our awareness of truth. The moment truth fills consciousness, the appearance of discord melts away as naturally as darkness dissolves at dawn. This is why spiritual healing comes not from treating the body, but from awakening consciousness. The outer condition is only the symptom of an inner belief. Remove the belief, and the symptom has no place to remain. Now listen to this gently, without fear. There is no power in disease. There is no law in disease. There is no mind in disease. It cannot act. It cannot think. It cannot continue except by our belief in it. In the same way, lack has no power to limit. It is never an outer condition. It is always the result of consciousness believing that God is external, intermittent, or partial. But when we know God as the infinite, ever-present source expressing through every individual, the sense of lack dissolves, for nothing in spirit withholds itself. Sin, too, has no spiritual life. It is not an action. It is a belief in separation. When the individual awakens to oneness, the compulsion of sin falls away as naturally as a leaf falls from a tree in autumn. Therefore, in the infinite way, we do not attempt to change error. We do not attempt to heal it. We do not attempt to correct it. We see through it. Healing comes by revelation, by the recognition that error has no spiritual foundation, no God-given life, no actual law supporting it. As you come to understand this, fear diminishes. And as fear diminishes, the appearance of discord loses its foothold. A higher law begins to operate, not because you have invoked it, but because you have stopped denying it. Let us sit with this quietly. There is no power apart from God. Therefore, there is no error with power. There is only the one presence, and in the light of that presence, every false appearance dissolves. This is the law behind spiritual healing. This is why miracles appear where truth is known. Not because truth overcomes anything, but because truth reveals that there was nothing to overcome. Let this truth rest in your consciousness. Hold it gently, without strain, and let the peace that flows from it settle into your being. Let us move now into a subject that lies at the very heart of spiritual living, the nature of prayer. For thousands of years, humanity has prayed to God in ways that assume God is absent until summoned, indifferent until persuaded, silent until petitioned, inactive until invoked. This is the prayer of separation. It is the prayer of fear. It is the prayer of a mind that believes itself outside of God's presence and therefore feels compelled to reach upward, outward, somewhere for help. But this is not prayer, not true prayer, not spiritual prayer. not the prayer that brings healing, harmony, or realization. In the infinite way, prayer is not asking God for anything. It is not seeking intervention. It is not pleading for change, nor is it a method to influence outer conditions. Prayer is recognition, silent, sacred recognition. Prayer is the quiet awareness of God's presence already here, already functioning, already complete. It is the stilling of the mind long enough for truth to reveal itself. It is the resting of the soul in the assurance that the one who formed the universe is the very life, substance, and intelligence expressing as you. The moment prayer becomes a request, we have assumed lack. The moment prayer becomes effort, we have assumed separation. The moment prayer becomes persuasion, we have assumed God is reluctant to bless. But God does not withhold. God does not delay. God does not respond. God is the very presence and activity of harmony. God is the living law, operating as your being. God is the fullness of all good already present in the depth of consciousness. True prayer is the recognition of this fact. When you sit in prayer, not to change anything, not to get anything, not to fix anything, but simply to rest in the assurance that God is the only presence, the only power, the only life, you will discover that prayer has nothing to do with words. Prayer is communion. Prayer is contact, not contact with a distant being, but contact with the center of your own being, where God and man are one. You see, the only prayer that is ever answered is the prayer of recognition, not recognition of the outer condition, not recognition of the problem, but recognition of truth. When you acknowledge God's presence, even in the faintest whisper of intuition, the false sense called problem begins to dissolve of its own accord. This is why Jesus said, "Your Father knoweth what things ye have need of before ye ask. For in truth, there is no before and no after in God. There is only the eternal now, in which every good is already fulfilled." And so, we do not pray to bring good into our lives. We pray to awaken to the good already present. Prayer is the way we lift our awareness from the realm of appearances into the realm of spiritual reality. It is the way we stop fighting shadows and begin to behold the light behind them. It is the way we turn from the testimony of the senses and rest in the testimony of spirit. In the depths of prayer, one becomes aware that God is not a power to be used. God is not a force to manipulate. God is not a presence that comes and goes. God is infinite, being, expressing itself without limitation. When this is realized, harmony appears not because we have prayed for it, but because harmony is the nature of God, and God is the nature of our being. There is a moment in true prayer when words cease. Thought ceases, desire ceases, and only the presence remains. This is the holy instant. This is communion. This is the essence of spiritual healing. In this silence, the false sense of self melts away. The belief in two powers disappears. The mind grows still. And into this stillness flows the gentle assurance, I am here. I am the life of you. I am the light of you. Be still and know. In that knowing, the so-called miracle takes place. Not as an act of God intervening, but as the natural consequence of consciousness recognizing its source. Prayer never changes God. Prayer changes us. It opens us to receive what has always been true, but until that moment was hidden behind the veil of fear, desire, and human reasoning. Let us pause a moment now and feel the essence of true prayer. We are not asking, we are not seeking, we are not desiring. We are recognizing the presence of God, recognizing the completeness of God, recognizing the allness of God as the very life appearing here, as you, as me, as all. This is prayer. This is communion. This is the secret through which healing flows. Let us now go deeper, for this next principle is the cornerstone of all spiritual demonstration. It is the foundation upon which every genuine healing rests. Without understanding this, we continue to deal with life as though outer conditions have power, as though matter determines experience, as though circumstances shape our destiny. But when this principle is understood, even in a small measure, life begins to transform from the inside out. The principle is simple yet profound. All experience is the outpicturing of consciousness. Not the consciousness of God in its infinite perfection, but the consciousness we entertain, accept, and identify as ourselves. The world believes that events, conditions, bodies, and people produce our experiences. But in spiritual realization, we discover that the outer realm is only an effect, a reflection, a shadow of the state of consciousness we are living in. Consciousness is cause, form is consequence. Consciousness is seed, experience is harvest. Consciousness is the inner climate. The outer world is the weather. When this truth dawns, even faintly, it frees us from the age-old struggle of attempting to manage, fix, correct, or control the external world. We recognize that nothing external has authority. The power lies within, not within human will, not within thought manipulation, not within positive affirmations, but within the silent, living awareness of truth. You see, the body does not become sick by itself. The finances do not collapse by themselves. The relationships do not fracture by themselves. These conditions are not self-created, nor do they arise from a universe acting upon us. They arise from the false sense of self we carry, beliefs in separation, fear, limitation, age, heredity, mortality. But these beliefs are not part of your spiritual identity. They are clouds passing through consciousness. And when truth is realized, the clouds dissolve and the experience changes, not because we have changed the outer world, but because we have changed our awareness of what governs the world. This is the secret behind every spiritual healing Jesus performed. He did not treat conditions. He did not battle disease. He did not attempt to fix matter. He knew that the condition was nothing more than the projection of the patient's consciousness, and that the moment truth was brought to bear, the false sense would evaporate and harmony would appear. When Jesus said, "Thy faith hath made thee whole," he was not referring to belief, positive thinking, or emotional trust. He was referring to the capacity of consciousness to open itself to the truth of being, allowing the spiritual fact to dissolve the material illusion. Consciousness is the cause of all experience, and therefore consciousness is the only place where healing can occur. In the infinite way, we do not heal bodies. We illuminate consciousness. We bring truth to the darkened corners where fear has taken residence. We rest in the awareness that the only reality is God expressing itself. And when this light enters consciousness, conditions change, because they must. The outer realm has no choice but to conform to the state of consciousness that beholds it. Now, let us consider this gently. If consciousness holds fear, the world will appear threatening. If consciousness holds lack, the world will appear empty. If consciousness holds separation, the world will appear divided. If consciousness holds material identity, the world will appear material. But if consciousness awakens to God as the only reality, then the world appears harmonious, abundant, whole, and unified. This is not magic. This is not metaphysics for personal gain. This is the law of spiritual being. The moment consciousness is lifted, the appearance must follow. Not immediately in all cases, for appearances have their own momentum, but inevitably, because cause determines effect. Imagine a beam of light shining into a darkened room. The darkness flees, not by struggle, but by simple presence. So it is when consciousness is illumined by truth. The healer does not heal. The healer does not fix. The healer does not manipulate thought. The healer rests in the awareness that God is the only cause, and in this recognition, the false sense dissolves. When you understand that consciousness is cause, you cease to blame life, you cease to blame people, you cease to blame circumstances, you cease to fear appearances. Instead, you turn within, quietly, gently, without self-condemnation, and you ask, what false belief am I holding? What truth has not yet been realized? What aspect of separateness is being revealed for release? For every discord is simply an invitation to deeper realization. Every challenge is a doorway through which greater light may enter. Every appearance is an opportunity to rest more fully in the truth that God alone is the substance of our lives. We are not trying to create better conditions. We are learning to behold the truth behind conditions. And when truth is known, harmonies appear not as miracles, but as the natural functioning of divine law. Let us rest again in a moment of inner quiet, and let this principle anchor in our awareness. Consciousness is cause. God is the consciousness of my being. Therefore, only harmony can express. Hold that gently, not as effort, not as declaration, but as recognition. For this is the foundation of all spiritual demonstration. Let us continue now, quietly, for we are reaching a point in our unfolding where the inner eye must open, not the physical eye that sees form, but the spiritual vision that beholds reality. For unless we learn to see the invisible, we remain bound by appearances. Unless we awaken to what is, we remain captivated by what seems to be. Remember this always. All spiritual transformation begins in the unseen. Nothing in the outer world changes until something within consciousness is recognized. The invisible must precede the visible, because spirit is cause and form is effect. What cannot be seen with the eyes is the only realm in which true change occurs. Human living is based upon form, matter, events, conditions, what the senses testify to. But all appearances are mere shadows of a deeper reality. And until we acknowledge that deeper reality, the shadows will continue to dance as though they possess substance and power. You cannot correct shadows. You cannot reshape them. You cannot argue with them. You cannot pray them away. You must change the light that casts them. And so we discover that every step in spiritual growth is the turning of attention from the visible to the invisible, from the effect to the cause, from the form to the source. The moment one seeks to change the outer, one is living in the belief that outer things have reality. But the moment one turns within, into the silent recognition of the invisible presence, the so-called outer begins to realign itself naturally. You see, there is a world behind this world, a presence behind the appearance, a life behind the form, and the mystic is the one who learns to live from that inner world, not ignoring the outer, but recognizing that it has no authority over him. The mystic knows that what the senses report is always incomplete, always distorted by human limitation, and therefore never the final truth. Only the unseen, the silent, the infinite presence within can reveal reality. This is why Jesus could say, "Judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment." He was not speaking of moral judgment. He was speaking of spiritual vision, the capacity to behold the invisible spiritual fact behind every visible condition. In that moment of recognition, healing takes place. When Jesus looked at the sick, the sinner, the broken, he did not see those conditions. He saw the perfection of the invisible spirit expressing as the individual. And because he saw the invisible truth, the visible appearance had no choice but to conform. This is the principle. Recognition precedes manifestation. Awareness precedes change. Spirit precedes form. You cannot wait for outer conditions to improve before recognizing truth. The recognition itself is the improvement. The appearance is the echo. You cannot wait for the body to heal before knowing that life is whole. The knowing heals, not the waiting. You cannot wait for supply to appear before knowing the infinite source within. The knowing reveals the supply. All spiritual breakthroughs occur the moment you stop looking at conditions and begin resting in the invisible presence that is the truth of your being. Let us take this gently, for the human mind cannot grasp it, but the spirit within you already knows. The visible world is a photograph taken yesterday. It is past. It is memory. It is the outpicturing of a consciousness you no longer inhabit. To seek change out there is to argue with yesterday. To seek truth within is to step into the eternal now where God alone is operating. So how do we recognize the invisible? Not through imagination, not through effort, not through will. We recognize the invisible by beholding, by quietly observing within ourselves the presence that is always here, the presence that does not fluctuate, the presence that does not fear, does not strive, does not lack. This presence felt in silence, sensed in stillness, known in deep rest is the only reality. And as we acknowledge it, something subtle begins to happen. The grip of appearances weakens, fear dissolves, resistance drops away, and the peace of God begins to fill consciousness like a rising tide. This peace is not the result of outer improvement. This peace causes outer improvement. Once the invisible is recognized, the visible reorganizes itself without your direction, without your effort, without your manipulation. Harmony appears because harmony is the nature of the invisible presence you have touched. We are not trying to change the outer world. We are learning to behold the inner kingdom. For the moment you see what is unseen, the seen loses its hypnotic power. Let us rest again, just briefly, feeling the deep truth that the unseen is the real, that God's world is within, that the spirit of truth is the substance behind every form, and that as we recognize it, everything in the visible world aligns with that recognition. This is the law. This is the secret. This is the foundation of all spiritual unfolding. The invisible must be known before the visible can change. Let us move now into the living demonstration of everything we have unfolded thus far. For spiritual teaching means little until it becomes spiritual experience. It is not enough to understand principles intellectually. It is not enough to admire truth or agree with it. It must be felt. It must be realized. It must touch the depth of our being where transformation naturally takes place. The shift we speak of, the change in consciousness that reorders the entire structure of life, does not come with noise. It does not come with excitement. It does not come with fireworks or emotional upheaval. It comes quietly. It comes in stillness. It comes, as Scripture says, like a thief in the night, not stealing anything, but removing the false sense we had guarded so tightly. This shift often begins subtly. One morning you wake and notice that something is different. not out there in here. There is a softness, a spaciousness, a sense of resting in a presence you cannot define but can feel. The mind is quieter, the fear is lighter, the sense of urgency has loosened its grip. You have not solved your problems, but you no longer believe they have authority. Something in you has turned toward the light. This is the shift. It may come in meditation, or while walking, or while washing dishes, or while listening to a child's laughter. It may come in a moment of crisis, when all human avenues fail and you are left with nothing but surrender. It may come spontaneously, without cause or warning, but when it comes, without thought that something real has occurred. This inner recognition is the seed of transformation. It is the foundation upon which harmony begins to appear. It is the invisible cause behind the visible change. You may notice that the conditions of your life begin to alter. The body relaxes. The pain diminishes. Opportunities arise. Relationships soften. Conflicts dissolve. Supply flows more naturally. But these outer changes are not the shift. They are the echo of the shift. They are the consequence, not the cause. They are the shadows moving because the inner light has brightened. Understand this well. You have not changed the outer world. You have awakened within, and consciousness, being cause, rewrites the picture you call your life. The shift also brings a change in perception. You look at others and see not personalities, not faults, not histories, not wounds. You see the same presence you have touched within yourself. You recognize the Christ as the identity of every individual, no matter how deeply concealed beneath fear or conditioning. And in that recognition, you become incapable of judgment. This is why relationships heal, not because you work on them, but because a new seeing dissolves the old reactions. The shift also transforms your relationship with supply. No longer do you look outward for security. No longer do you fear the fluctuations of the world. You discover a wellspring within, a quiet assurance that you are supported, sustained, maintained by an infinite source that knows no depletion. Because of this, your actions become free of desperation. Your choices become peaceful. Your motives become pure. And harmony begins to flow into every channel of your life. The shift also changes your relationship with your body. You stop trying to fix it. You stop fearing it. You stop treating it as a fragile object. Instead, you behold its spiritual essence, an instrument through which the life of God expresses. And as fear dissolves, the body responds with increased vitality, ease, and alignment. But perhaps the most profound evidence of the shift is this. You no longer seek God, you feel God. You no longer search for truth, you recognize truth. You no longer plead, you rest. You no longer strive, you surrender. And in that surrender, you find a peace that cannot be shaken, not by illness, not by loss, not by conflict, not by the appearance of discord. You have found the indwelling presence, and once found, it becomes the anchor of your entire life. The storms may come, but they cannot uproot you. The winds may blow, but they cannot uncenter you. The world may shift, but you remain in the still point where God is known. This is the shift, the dawn of spiritual awareness, the beginning of a new dimension of living. And because it is rooted in truth, it does not fade. It may be overshadowed momentarily by old habits of thought, but it returns, always returns, because it is your nature. The shift is not something you must maintain. It is something you are. It is the Christ of your being awakening to itself. Let us rest now for a moment in silence, feeling that gentle inner movement, the quiet turning of consciousness toward its source. This is the shift. This is the transformation. This is the rewriting of the outer world by the light of the inner. As we come now to the close of this period of unfolding, let us not think of it as an ending, but as a return to the presence from which all spiritual awareness flows. For the truth we have contemplated is not something we acquire or something we carry away. It is something we awaken to again and again, each time we turn within. The presence is always here. The silence is always here. The light is always here. The Christ is always here. It is we who wander from it, not it from us. It is we who forget, not it who disappears. It is we who lose our way in appearances, not it who abandons us. This path, this infinite way, is not a journey to God. It is the recognition that God has been the substance of our being from the beginning. No matter how deeply we explored the nature of miracles, the nature of consciousness, the nature of prayer, the nature of healing, the essence of it all is beautifully simple. Be still and know. Know what? Know that the presence you seek is the presence you already are. Know that the life you pray for is the life expressing through you now. Know that the harmony you desire is the harmony of your true being. Know that God is not coming to you. God is living you. And the moment you touch that knowing, however faintly, however briefly, healing begins. Healing is the natural activity of the Christ recognized. Healing is the effortless consequence of truth unobscured. Healing is the grace that flows the instant we surrender the belief in a selfhood apart from God. Let this be the closing understanding. You do not walk this path alone. You do not practice this truth alone. You do not unfold this awareness alone. The presence within you is the teacher, the guide, the healer, the comforter. It is the life that breathes you and the love that enfolds you. And every time you return to that inner stillness, every time you pause, every time you rest, every time you become aware of the gentle, silent I within, you are coming home, home to the Christ of your being, home to the peace that does not depend on circumstances, home to the source from which all blessings flow, home to the truth that has never left you for a single moment. As we end this session, let us sit together in a shared recognition, quietly, without words, that the presence we have spoken of is here, not in theory, not in hope, not in future attainment, but here, now, as the very essence of your being. Rest in that, live in that, return to that again and again, for in that returning lies the beginning of true healing and the unfolding of a life lived from the Christ within. Peace, peace, peace.